Thrift Store Guys, submitted by Hattie the Best. This happened 2 years ago. I was working at a local thrift store while I was going to college. I'm still there and finishing up school in another year. Can't wait for spring. Around Halloween time, we always have a lot of people coming in looking for costumes and even regular outfits for whatever they're dressing up for. The same goes for the time of year when a local charity holds a disco fundraiser. People come out in droves for stuff that is from the 70s, or at least look like it. So, I'm a female, and it was a Saturday morning and things were pretty slow when a group of 3 guys came in and started looking around. We don't keep tabs on everybody like a lot of other retail places do, and I could tell they were having fun looking at all of the stuff and, quite frankly, a lot of the junk in our store. But they became pretty rowdy at one point, and our store manager had to go over and tell them to enjoy themselves but try to keep it down. We do have a lot of older clientele, and they are usually the ones who complain the most. If we can head craziness off at the pass, it's a lot less to deal with when crotchety old people make complaints to our higher-ups. I really wish we would have cut them off at the pass right then and there. Anyway, these guys were picking out some older suits that we had, and I'm going to be honest and say I was laughing at some of the things they were saying. One of them was a really funny guy, and while I was straightening things out and moving some inventory around, I caught myself laughing more than once. I know, I'm a bad influence. They finally got everything they needed, some cheesy wigs and oversized suits. Not really sure what they were going for, and when I asked them while checking them out, they just kept laughing and saying they were going as grumpy old men. The really funny guy had found a very loud red plaid jacket, kind of like the one the guy in Animal House wears. They paid up, I said Happy Halloween, and they just laughed and left. That night, a group of my friends and I were going to a haunted catacombs attraction in our town. These things always seem to spring up around Halloween, and they're very popular. I'm sure it's the same in any fairly large town. We actually had like 3 or 4 of them spread out across our county. I hadn't been to one since I went to a very scary one that I actually had to tap out of. I'd heard good things about the one we were going to, so we all were excited. My 2 friends I'll call A and B met me at my apartment for dinner and some drinks. We were going to meet my other friend at the place and were looking for a spooky good time, and we weren't dressing up or anything. This was strictly to get scared and then come back to my apartment for more drinks, and a couple of our boyfriends were coming over after they got out of work. I love Halloween, and I really like scary stuff, hence why I'm sending the story into you. I like the fall weather here in the Northeast, I love the decorations, I love carving jack-o'-lanterns and all the stuff that kids are into. I guess I'm still just a big kid even though I'm 21. I don't care. Holidays are awesome, and I love making the most of all of them. My friends got there, and I was whipping up some stir-fry while my friend shared a bottle of wine with dinner before we headed out to the place. I wasn't drinking and was our designated driver, if anyone is wondering. Don't drink and drive, kids. We met our other friend in the parking lot, and there were a lot of people at the place. I was worried that there would be too many, and the scare factor would go down if there were a lot of us inside. But someone who worked there overheard what I said and assured me that people went in spaced out so as to get the full effect of what was going on. We got closer to the entrance of the place, and there was another guy going over the rules. At any point you could tap out and someone would come and get you to take you out of the rooms. I was sure I would be fine as well as my friends, but you never know not having been in a place before. Some people were talking about it being very intense, and 2 guys behind us said this was their second time through and that it was pretty scary. We got inside and started to follow the paths around from room to room. Each area had a different theme, and it was pitch black, save for some low lighting to make sure you didn't trip over things. There were lots of weird spaces that you actually had to either squeeze through or crawl over. People were always jumping out with scare tactics from behind or in front of you. It made it pretty cool. There were lots of screams and lots of jump scares, and we were just enjoying every second of it. The guys that were behind us had told us there was one room that was really freaky, but they didn't tell us where it was. So that upped the creep factor, not knowing what was around the next corner. We got into said room, and it was set up like a surgical room. There were 2 bodies on tables with doctors and nurses dressed up with skull masks and what looked like real surgical kits. Of course, there was tons of fake blood and screams, and I can't tell you what is scarier. Oh wait, yes I can. It's not the chainsaw guy. It's the illusion of a surgical procedure going very wrong or unwanted. That thought creeps me out more than anything else, as I am terrified of going to the doctor and dentist, even though I'm in very good health. That room really unnerved me, and my heart was going as well as my friends' hearts. I know because they told me they were all so disturbed by what we had just seen. The next room was completely dark and pretty quiet. Of course, we were on high alert for something crazy to happen. And that's when I felt someone grab my arm and start dragging me towards the side, away from my friends. Of course, I screamed out and started yelling for A, B, and C, but there were tons of other screams in the room and everything got completely confusing. I'm not going to lie, I did think about tapping out right then because I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't find my friends. I could hear them calling my name as I was calling out to them, but there were so many other people calling out names of their friends and vice versa. It was just super confusing and very scary. But it went too far when I felt a hand clap over my mouth. I knew no one was supposed to touch us like that from the attraction, and I was already worked up, but now I was getting really scared. I started flailing my arms behind me with whoever was holding me by one arm and pulling me backwards while trying to cover my mouth. Whoever it was took his hand away from my mouth but then moved that hand to my chest and then to my crotch. Again, I knew this was not part of the attraction. I started to scream out again and kick and flail my arms, screaming that someone was attacking me. But in the fracas of what was going on in the dark, no one was really paying any attention to me. Suddenly, these strobe lights went off, and I could see everyone in the room for a couple of seconds, and they were all moving around with a bunch of actors dressed up like orderlies in their scrubs, with crazy masks and blood and stuff. They were chasing and moving people back towards the surgical area. And that was part of the attraction. But what was happening to me certainly was not. In the strobe light, I caught something. The arm of a red plaid jacket. It didn't register right away, but after a minute my brain kicked in and I realized it was one of the guys from the thrift store. The funny one, and I stress the word funny. He certainly wasn't part of the actors, and he was not being funny right now. My fear turned to anger, and I balled up a fist and took a swing behind me underhand, and it did what it needed to do. It caught the guy right in the balls. He yelled out in pain, and someone else grabbed my other arm and started yanking me towards a corner of the room that was dark and still was not lit up by the strobe lights. For whatever reason, I immediately knew it was one of the other guys I saw in the thrift store. Thank God my screams of help were heard by the monitors of the room and my friends. A hand came down on my shoulder, and a voice said, "I'm here to help you. Do you need to leave?" I yelled out, "Yes, someone is touching me, and it's not one of your actors." The big guy, who was in hospital scrubs, said, "Follow me, I'll get you out of here." I took a chance. I yelled again for my friends, hoping they heard me, as I said I was leaving and I was in trouble. The guy who was really nice snuck me out of a secret passageway and into a back area that was well lit. It was crazy to have to talk to someone with this crazy makeup on, but he was seriously helping me and asking me what had happened. I told him that someone had grabbed me and then tried to touch me and cover my mouth. He looked very serious and said, "Please, wait here," and then picked up a walkie-talkie and started talking into it about what was going on. I overheard the staticky reply that someone was on their way, and within seconds there were a bunch of other people in the back area with me. An alarm went off, and it sounded like they were shutting things down, which they were. They asked me to describe the person who was grabbing me, and all I could tell them about was the red plaid jacket. Some people I could overhear were complaining, and others were startled by the lights that started to come on. And for a second I felt bad that I was ruining everyone else's time. But then it kicked in again that I had just been violated by some creep in there, and that he was still somewhere on the grounds of the attraction. That made me start to freak out even more, and the guy who was helping me told me his name was Steve and that I was going to be okay. Thank God there were local law enforcement officials in the parking lot helping out with security, and one came in and started talking to me, and I had to repeat my story. He asked if I was physically hurt, and I said no, but it was scary as hell to be grabbed like that. He nodded his head and took notes, and he got my name and information and said to wait there, and then asked where my friends were. He said he'd do his best with the people of the attraction to find my friends and let them know I was in the back, and they could come and get me. After a little while, my friends did reunite with me, and I had to tell them the entire story all over again and was crying at this point. The cops took another full statement from me and got the names of my friends even though I didn't know why, and I said I just wanted to go home. The people who ran the attraction were checking out everyone as they were escorted out to look for the plaid jacket guy, but they didn't find him. I repeated that I just wanted to go home and have another glass of wine and see my boyfriend. The attraction people were apologizing over and over and got my information too, saying they did want to follow up with me, and if there was anything that they could do, they would. At that point, I just wanted to leave, but was thankful that they were taking what I was saying seriously. I think they ended up shutting the event down for the rest of the night, and I'm sure there were a lot of people out there that were very pissed off about that. To them, I am sorry. We went back to my apartment and the story was over, right? Nope. We were all shaken up and got back to my apartment. It was still a pretty nice night out, albeit a little chilly, and we went out onto my back patio. My boyfriend was already there, and he had a little fire going in our chimenea. We all had a couple of drinks, and I related the story once again. After a little bit, B's boyfriend came over, and he had a couple of pals with them as well. We weren't planning on a huge party, but it kind of turned into a pretty good one. I was trying to relax as best I could, and our back patio sits right on the edge of the parking lot to my building. At one point in the party, maybe an hour later, my boyfriend noticed someone standing on the other side of the fence. It's one of those fences that has the pickets, and they're kind of off-centered so you can see through a little bit. He didn't say anything right away, but I noticed when he got up and went over to the little gate. He yelled out, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" The person on the other side of the fence sort of backed up, and that's when my boyfriend opened the gate. Lo and behold, there was the guy in the plaid jacket with two of his buddies. It doesn't take a genius to know that the red jacket was a dead giveaway. It was the guys from the thrift store I had seen earlier, and certainly the guy who had attacked me in the attraction. I didn't think about it earlier, but when I saw his face after I had gotten up, I knew it was him. I also knew that it was a coincidence that he might have been at the attraction, but this was no coincidence that he was here. These guys had followed us back to my apartment. All of my guy friends immediately got up and went out into the parking lot area, and the guys from the thrift store backed up a little bit, but knew they were busted. My boyfriend is a serious bodybuilder, and the other guys at the party were also into fitness, and they were very well built too. My friend C got her cell phone out and said she was calling the cops, but my boyfriend said, "Wait a minute," when he saw her doing what she was doing. The guys approached the other guys, and my boyfriend said that the guy had a knife out. My guy friends approached the creeps from the thrift store and the catacombs. When they realized they were being confronted by four hulks, the guy in the red plaid jacket started saying some gibberish, and my boyfriend cut him off. He knew they were up to no good, and we all knew what he had tried to do to me in the dark at the haunted house thing. My boyfriend said, "All right, you guys have two choices. You can deal with us, or you can deal with the cops." There was silence as we all listened to see what their response was going to be. There was nothing, and my boyfriend said it again, and one of the other guys said, "Hey man, we don't want any trouble." And my boyfriend said, "Too bad, you've already got trouble." Us girls were kind of crammed in the gate area watching this, and my friend C once again said we needed to just call the police. Her boyfriend waved her off, and all of them started to walk towards the guys. Before those guys knew what was up, my boyfriend and C's boyfriend got in their faces and immediately started to pummel them. There was a lot of shouting and fighting, but the three guys were no match for my boyfriend and his friends. I'm not going to go into all the details, but those guys from the haunted catacombs got their asses handed to them, and even though we were yelling in the melee, none of us called the police. Some neighbors came out when they heard the noise, but by that time the fight was over, and the three guys were laying on the ground. My boyfriend saw the knife next to the guy with the plaid jacket and kicked it away from him underneath another car. Plaid jacket guy got on his knees and looked up, and I could see his face was very bloody from being punched more than 1 or 2 times. My boyfriend was breathing heavily and just said, "Get the fuck out of here and don't ever come back." The guys from the thrift store got up and started running through the parking lot to what I only assumed was their car. My boyfriend and friends just watched them run away, and A and B were also yelling at them, and I started talking to my neighbors and told them what had happened earlier. Everyone agreed to not call the police, but would if they came back. My neighbors said they would keep an eye out, and then laughed when they heard how my boyfriend said they had a choice between them and the cops. Of course, this just shook me up more that the guys had followed us home after what had happened, and I started to debate back and forth whether I should call the cops. My friend C said maybe I should go back to work the next day and find out their names based on the purchases they made, but that's when I remembered they paid with cash. We went back to our little party and invited our neighbors over, and 2 of them did come over and hang out with us. We just kept talking about the night's events. I slowly calmed down enough to have a few laughs, but inside I was still freaked out that this guy did what he did to me with the intention of, I'm sure, way more at the haunted catacombs. And then the fact that they had followed us back to my apartment was still keeping me a little uneasy. Nothing else happened that night, and I never did report it to the cops. But the owner of the haunted catacombs did have my name and reached out to me the next day to see if everything was okay, and that the police had stuck around and asked them more questions. They didn't have any record of the guys who were there and who we suspected of doing what they did, but the police suspected that either the guys had been there before, or maybe were past workers and knew a secret way out, as they didn't get busted when everyone else was leaving the attraction. It's been a year and I am hyper-vigilant about where I go and my surroundings now. Goes to show that just like the ending of your stories, Uncle Josh, it could be anybody or anything, including the guy next door. I just thank my lucky stars that those guys are not my neighbors or the guy next door. I haven't ever seen them again, and I hope that I never do. Trick-or-treating as a kid. Submitted by Anton. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but it happened to me when I was a kid in the suburbs of Chicago. I lived in a decent neighborhood, but there was one house we always called the haunted house. It was at the very end of our street that ended in a dead end. We never saw the people who lived there come out, and it was only like every other month that someone did come over there to cut the grass and stuff in the spring and summer. Sometimes there was a car parked in the driveway, but again, we never really saw anybody around. It was just this old, beat-up house, and we all said that it was haunted. Just silly kid stuff. One year on Halloween, I was out trick-or-treating with my friends, and we hit all the houses in the neighborhood on one side, before coming back towards my house on the other side when we got to the dead end. Everyone in my neighborhood always had their lights on for Halloween, so we knew where we could trick-or-treat, and the houses that didn't want to give any candy out. We weren't punks and didn't do anything stupid to the houses or families that didn't do trick-or-treating. I mean, we were pretty well-behaved kids and just went where we were supposed to go. We said trick-or-treat, please, and thank you. The year that I'm talking about, we were making the turnaround to come back towards my house, and my friend Mark noticed that the light was on the porch of the haunted house. There was one light on in the downstairs, too, and none of us thought this was weird. We were about 10, and this was a period in time where parents didn't walk around with their kids when they went trick-or-treating. I mean, especially in our neighborhood, which was really safe. Times have certainly changed. Mark wanted to go trick-or-treat at the house, but some of my friends were on the fence, as we never saw anyone there, and we found it hard to believe someone was there on Halloween night. But, like kids, we figured, what the heck, another piece of candy. We walked up the cracked concrete driveway to the porch and started daring one another as to who would go first to knock on the door, or just stand there and yell trick-or-treat. We finally got my friend Steve to do it, and he cautiously went up onto the porch and yelled out, "Trick-or-treat!" He was wearing his Superman outfit, which was really just underoos. Yeah, this was a while ago. We were just a little behind him on the stairs, waiting to see what would happen. We were a little bit scared because, after all, this was the haunted house. After a second or two, the door opened fully, and there stood a guy in a white apron that had blood on it. At first we thought it was a good trick rather than a treat. But this guy, and I figured out it was a guy because even though he had a mask on, it was clear that he was also wearing a Batman mask. He didn't say anything, and he didn't open the door. He just lifted up a clear plastic bag with what looked like a dead cat inside. The bag was all smeared with blood, and it was really making us go nuts. Steve screamed out, and the guy lifted the bag that was now dripping blood onto the already bloody apron the guy was wearing. That was enough for us. We all turned and ran, leaving Steve on the porch. He was still standing there screaming before he realized we had taken off, and then quickly turned and jumped down the stairs and started running after us. We skipped a whole bunch of houses from our trick-or-treating, and our yelling and screaming kind of mixed with all the other people yelling trick-or-treat. Some people did look at us, but they figured we were just trying to scare all the other kids as we ran back to my house. We all burst through my front door and started to tell my parents what we had just seen. My dad thought we were trying to play a prank on him and told us to knock it off or we wouldn't be able to continue to trick-or-treat. We all told him that we were serious, and that's when he left and went over to my next-door neighbor and knocked on his door. He talked to that friend who lived there, and a really great guy that our family is still friends with after all these years. They both decided to walk down to the haunted house to see just what the heck was going on, and thinking that we were making up a story. My dad told us to just wait there for him and to not come down until he got back. My dad was a really good man. All of my friends loved him, and we all listened to him when he said the things that he said, so we stayed put. After about 10 minutes, he came back with the guy next door and gave us another look and said, "Trick-or-treating is over for tonight. You can go to the 2 houses across the street, but I want your butts back here in under 5 minutes." We ran across the street, still pretty scared, but again, we did what my dad said. While we were over there, he was calling the police. When everyone got back to my house, we were going to have some candy and watch a scary movie before everyone had to go back to their houses. My dad went out on our porch, and we were all looking out the window when a cop car pulled into our driveway. My dad and the guy next door talked to the police officer, and all of them walked back down to the haunted house. They were gone for a little bit and then came back, and my dad went right to the kitchen to talk to my mom. And while we were trying to hear what he was saying, he realized that and said, "Just go watch your movie." That was the end of it. My dad didn't say anything about it for the rest of the night. We all just decided it was a prank on us and wondered how many other kids in the neighborhood also got dragged into that and got scared. We asked some of them the next day in school, but none of them had gone down to the haunted house like us morons. When we got home from school the next day, we did see a couple of cars in the driveway of the haunted house along with another police car. My dad was just getting home from work and told me to go in and do my homework and sent my 2 friends who were with me home. I asked him what was going on at the haunted house, and he said, "It's none of our business. Go do your homework." We all talked about it like kids talk about things, especially when something strange is happening in your neighborhood. But I didn't bring it up to my dad, as any time that I actually tried to ask him, he just gave me a look and shook his head. It wasn't until a couple of years later, after many times telling me and my friends to stay away from the house, that he told us what he had seen that night on Halloween. When he and our neighbor friend went down there were no lights on in the house and no one answered the door. They figured, yep, we were just telling stories. But when the police officer came and they all went back, no one answered the door, and again, there were no lights on. The next day when the police and some other people came out to check on the house, we found out that the house had been in foreclosure for years and no one lived there. We kind of figured that. There was no immediate family or people that could be identified as having any ties to the house. I mean, basically the house was abandoned, and the bank was sending people out to clear up the overgrown grass and weeds a couple of times in the spring and summer. We never did find out who that person was that we saw on the door, and everyone did believe our story because when the police did get access to the house, they did find a bag full of blood with a dead cat in it. There was no sign of forced entry in the house, and there was no sign of anyone ever having lived there at all. No one knows who that guy was, no one knows how he got in, and no one knew why the power was still on in a house that should have had it shut off a long time ago. It was just a Halloween mystery. Of course, that just fueled our stories about the haunted house, but we all listened to our parents and never went back there. Down the line, somebody else bought the house and fixed it up, and to my knowledge still lives there. To this day, when my friends and I get together or just catch up over the phone, that house always comes up, and the creepy guy and his dead cat is always a topic of conversation. Whoever he was, he scared the hell out of us, and I'm glad he just left it as a Halloween scare. I mean, there's lots of creeps out there. Everyone, be safe and have a happy Halloween. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. Got a couple of late submissions and figured, why save them for next year? Let's get them out on Halloween itself. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below. Everyone, have a happy and safe Halloween. And until next time, remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.